All right, my wonderful students. So we are working on being able to identify the different parts of the story arc and what makes each part so important. So our story arc, you're going to draw it right here. It looks like this. It starts out flat with our exposition. Then the longest part of the story is going to be your rising action, followed by the top of the part, which is the climax or the turning point. Then you come down for the falling action, and finally you have the resolution. Okay, so that will be drawn right here. Draw your story arc. So some definitions and why each part is important. So for the exposition, this is kind of like the introduction, where you find out about the characters and the setting. The next piece is the rising action. And within the rising action, this is the longest part of the story. And it's also where the conflict is introduced. An action is the longest part of the story, and it's also where the conflict, or the problem is another word for conflict, is first introduced. The climax, we're going to also refer to this as the turning point. This is where the main character changes somehow, or the action changes somehow. So looking at this, we call it the turning point because literally the story turns. It changes right here at our climax. The climax is also the most exciting part of our story. The falling action and the resolution are pretty similar. This is where the story starts to wrap up, and this is just the end of our story. Okay, so like we talked about with conflict, this is the problem of the story. It could be a problem between characters, could be a problem with the character within themselves, could be a problem with the character and the setting that they're in. Any type of problem is what the conflict could be. And remember, this is going to be found in the rising action. A dynamic character is the character who changes. This is usually going to be the narrator or the main character. Almost always, in fact, that's going to be the dynamic one. Think of dynamic like dynamite. It's the one who, boom, changes all of a sudden. That's your dynamic character. A static character, think of like static electricity, like when you rub a balloon on your shirt and it sticks. This is the character who just kind of sticks and stays the same. These are going to be all the smaller characters. So for example, Ponyboy is a dynamic character. He changes big time. Dally, I would argue, is pretty static. He just stays mean. Or Soda Pop is pretty static. He starts out kind of the same as he ends. Ponyboy changes though, so he's dynamic. Setting is where and when a story takes place. We all know that the setting is where it happens, but in 7th grade you also need to know when it happens. Does it take place back in the day, during the Civil War era, in ancient Greece, right? All those things make a difference to our story. Dialogue is two characters talking to each other, and that's where it's like, hello, John said, right? And this is where they're talking back and forth. That's an example of dialogue. Internal dialogue is what the dynamic character is going to do a lot. Why? Because this is a character talking to themselves. And so internal dialogue means they're thinking and talking to themselves. So it will look like this. Why am I so tall? I wondered. And that's internal dialogue, a character basically talking to themselves or wondering to themselves. Okay? These are the notes that you definitely need to know. Thank you for watching. Good luck.